Hi again, Taurus Sisters. My name is Amy K. Gunther. A lot of you, hello again. You've been watching these throughout the series of them, but in case you're new and you haven't watched the other ones, I want you to know what you're looking at. This is a video from a retreat that I had in May here in Michigan. I have a website called TaurusSisters.com, and over there you'll find lots of free stuff, a blog, a podcast. You'll also see Taurus Sisters Magazine. It is a print magazine that I will mail to your home, and it is wonderful. If you like the speakers, if you like the kinds of stuff you're hearing, you will really love Taurus Sisters Magazine. And also don't forget to get your free retreat kit. It's a free download. It will help you watch these videos, not only in order, but the worship songs that we sang at the retreat, links to the information about the speakers and their websites, all kind, a scripture poster. I haven't shown that yet, a scripture poster. So go get the link. All these are linked down below. This session that you're about to watch is from me. So there were 4 main sessions where all the women were together. The last one was, I talked at that last one, and I called it Letting Go of Ego and Taking Hold of Yeshua. So I hope it challenges and blesses you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. We're going to keep talking about Teshuvah, this idea of returning, and only in order to return, we have to let go of something, and we have to take hold of something. So tonight, this afternoon, I'm going to talk about letting go of ego. And the opposite of that, in my book, from what I've been hearing from the Father, is to take hold of Yeshua. If you want, you can open your Bibles. We're going to talk from Mark chapter 10, verses 35 to 45. And I'm just going to start by reading it. I'll give you a minute to go there if you want. Use your phone Bibles. I don't care. It's all the Word. Because what the Father has been telling me over the last few weeks to talk to you about is that nothing gets in our way of doing our kingdom work, of loving people well, more than our own selves. And when I analyze my own self, because what Christy said is absolutely true, we talk about things that the Father is teaching us. All of you who are moms, you teach your children often based on what you're learning. So it's just how it is. So the Father apparently needed me to shed some ego and to take hold of Yeshua. So in Mark 10, verses 35 to 45, we read this. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "All right, what do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." And Yeshua said to them, "You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "Sure, we're able." And Yeshua said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it's for those for whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Yeshua called them to him and said, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be a slave to all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Letting go of ego. So there's so much to unpack here, and I bet some of you could analyze this so much deeper than I could ever. I don't consider myself a Bible scholar at all. That is not, I'm a connector, I'm an encourager, I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not everything, am I? And it makes me feel unqualified to tell you anything about anything. But you know what? Let's just have a chat. A few years ago, I learned a feature on my Android phone, and it goes like this. I'm going to set off all your phones. Are you ready? Let me think of a good one. Google. Hey, Google, remind me at 5:30 p.m. to go home. And so then your phone, are your phones going off? So then, your phone reminds you of this, right? And because we need reminders. So all I'm going to do here is we're going to have a little chat, and I'm just going to remind you of stuff you already know, because I needed to remind myself to get out of my own way and to let go of ego, and then I'm going to grab onto something. I'm not going to just dump myself and become nothing. I'm going to become like Yeshua, so I'm going to take hold of him. So this little story about James and John and their request is also found in Matthew 20, and I found 8 things. We're going to go through 8 things that we can learn from this passage about letting go of ego and putting on Yeshua. And if you're curious, I was reading from the ESV, substituting Yeshua for Jesus. So the first thing is that ego says that God owes us something. But taking hold of Yeshua means we know our place. We know our right place. So in verse 35 in this story, we start right off with James and John, and they come up to him and they said, we want you to do whatever we want, as if Yeshua is some sort of magic genie, right? And I'm sure, again, we could analyze all kinds of depths in this, but what I see is a whole lot of arrogance and you owe me. And I just think it's so obnoxious of them to ask, and yet I probably would do the same thing. It's easy to see obnoxious in them, or in someone else, but really in my heart, I would be like, I'm the best guy. I'm the best one. I get to have that place. So they thought that they could get whatever they wanted. They thought that they could just get some sort of open favor. And now how much do we like that? I don't like it when people come to me. They say, Amy, what are you doing Tuesday night? I'm like, tell me what you want first. Because there's different levels of like how I'm going to answer that. But they come to Yeshua in all of their arrogance, and they're like, we want you to do whatever we ask. It's so obnoxious. We must ask according to his will. Sincerely. It's not like this little tagline that says, whatever, yeah, willing. And I say it too, but really, truly, we must want his will for us and not our own. And the Father is not a magic genie where we just think he gives us whatever we want. And of course, we know this because we don't get whatever we want. But I think we need to be careful in how we ask. In the other account in the story, Matthew 20, we see that it was their mom, right, that asked. So it's slightly same story, all true, but the question apparently came from her, and it made me think, but they're so responsible, right? Like they're grown men. Ultimately, it was also them. But how often do we put our ego on our children? And we want our children to be somehow exalted and puffed up because it makes us as moms look good. And I think that's just as obnoxious. And I need to be careful of that too. We ought to be proud of our children's accomplishments. My daughter just played at a beautiful piano recital, and I posted it on Facebook. You know what I posted with it, though? I didn't say, look at her talent. I said, look how hard she worked. She practiced diligently. And that got her to that point where she could play a beautiful piano piece. So I'm not saying we ought not to be proud of our children and encourage them in good, healthy ways, but we can't just try to make our desire for affirmation onto our children. And I kind of wonder if that's what their mom was doing. And I think that's a natural fleshly thing. I think a lot of us would struggle with that. Another place we have ego is in our marriages. I'm just going to say this really quickly. Do we know our place in our marriage? Do we know that there's order in marriage? And is our ego getting in the way and disrupting, not my marriage, your marriages, but as a collective, is ego getting in the way of the correct order in our marriage? Because that can cause all kinds of problems. And I think the enemy is trying to destroy your marriages. I'm pretty confident of that. I don't even have to say I think. The enemy hates what the Father is doing with this awakening that's happening. These videos we watch with music, they're all really inspirational, but where the rubber hits the road is in your marriage, ladies. Because God's doing something huge, but if the enemy can come between you and your husband, he's going to cause tension, and that's going to destroy the family, and that's going to destroy your faith community where you are. It's ripple effects. So don't let him in there, and I encourage you to learn about order if you're curious. So having a place in the correct order doesn't make you feel less. When you know your place, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your congregation. Like we can't all be in charge in a congregation. Nothing works. Really, multiple people should be in charge. And really, what does that even mean? And we're going to talk about that in a second too. Was Yeshua less because he wasn't the highest dude? Absolutely not. We have to just know our place. Knowing our place doesn't mean that we're less. And ego tells us that. The ego lies of our flesh, the ego lies of the world tell us if you're not the highest rank in whatever, you're less. But there's no less in the kingdom. We're just all children and servants of the Yah Most High. Okay, so number 2, ego says that recognition and position are important. But taking hold of Yeshua says that we are to be servant leaders. And the men in our congregations talk about that a lot because they need to keep their ego in check. And it's not easy. Like, they have flesh just like us. But this also applies to women, moms, friendships, all of these things. So in verse 36, they say, grant us to sit one at your right hand, one at your left in your glory. So they admit like it's his glory, but they want like this little piece of it. And I think that Yeshua is to be so highly exalted and esteemed. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And we need no piece of that. And when I want a piece of that, I'm out of place. And I'll never be satisfied because I'll never reach his glory. And that's okay. Because he loves me and he wants a relationship with me and he calls me his own. Is that not enough? I don't need to take Yeshua's glory. And not that these disciples were trying to take his glory, but it just feels weird what they were doing. Like, it's just not right. So they're so proud. They want recognition. They want a position. And ultimately, they want to feel and be important. They were already in his inner circle. Like, to us, we're like, we would love to be one of the 12 people closest to Yeshua. They were them, and that still did not satisfy them. They still wanted some closer status. And then I bet if they were at the right and the left, they'd still be arguing over which side is better. Give me the right, like it's musical chairs. They're all trying to get on the right. So they wanted position. They wanted to be important. They imagined there was something better than what they already had. They let their imaginations, I think, get in the way of what was already so precious. And instead of just enjoying that, they're distracting by asking for more. So the kingdom, and I say this all the time, the kingdom is opposite of the world. In the world tells us, the culture tells us that to be important is the only thing that matters. You could be important by having money. You could be important. Sometimes in our communities, people, I have talked to ladies who feel less important because they have fewer children than other people. Does that make a woman less important? Some women have no children at all. Are they less important? Nothing in the kingdom, none of these things make us more or less important in the kingdom. None of it. And really, when you get down to it, we're all sinners. We've all broken the law. There's no importance in the kingdom. And when we start chasing these feelings of recognition, I want people to see me, and I want them to honor me, and I want them to, and it's been weird for me. You guys keep praising me and thanking me, and it's okay, and I'm going to receive it because I know you're just so thankful, and I mean it when I say, you're welcome. But if I take that and I do this next year for that, it still might be a great retreat, but I've ruined it for myself. And I've taken glory from the one who did it, and it's just going to be messed up. I have to keep myself in check. We each have to keep ourselves in check. I think children struggle with this in sibling relationships. Poor middle child syndrome. My daughter's a middle child. This is what the world says. If you're a middle child, you're neglected. I tell her nonsense. She'll see a meme or something about a middle child syndrome, and she starts giggling at it. Sorry, Beth, I'm picking on you. And I'm like, don't listen to that. Who says? Who says that that's a thing? The world says that's the thing because middle children, somewhere one was neglected and then it becomes a thing and everybody has to feel sorry for the middle child. I'm not going to feel sorry for you. So we want to be important. So I teach my children very young, you're all important, and we all do that. I know you're all such great moms. But this idea of wanting to feel important starts very young, and we have to squish it because that's not the kingdom way. Sometimes ego is the opposite of pride, and sometimes it's being overly insecure. We can be so afraid of looking foolish that we tell God no. And the most obvious example that comes to mind of that is Moses, right? The father says, you're going to do this. You're going to be my spokesman. And Moses is like, nope, I'm going to look foolish. No. I don't think it's that Moses didn't want to please the Father and he didn't desire to walk in obedience. I think, and I don't know exactly why Moses said no. He obviously thought he would look foolish. And I think a lot of us, and myself, we say no to God when he calls us to do something, I don't know what, because we're afraid of looking foolish. We're afraid of failing in front of people. We're afraid of looking dumb or something. I mean, like, I'm the queen of looking dumb. And I don't like it. But if we don't look dumb sometimes, we're going to do nothing. Like, we just try to stay in a safe place where everyone always thinks we're looking good and we're doing, like, oh, they never mess up at all. You probably aren't doing anything. And I'm not talking about putting on a retreat. I'm talking about just everyday stuff. If the Father is calling you to adopt or foster, you better do it. And don't be afraid of looking dumb. That's a hard thing. Bad things happen sometimes. And people are not going to judge you. And if they do, shame on them. Go for it and take the risk. If you want to try homeschooling, yeah, you might look dumb sometimes. Things won't always go right. Go for it and take the risk. You want to, have a kind of a date with your husband. You're afraid of looking dumb. Go for it. Take the risk. Don't stay in a safe little bubble because you're afraid of looking dumb, because I think that's a form of ego. And the more I have found that I let go of my ego, I'll tell you what, I told one of the other ladies, I can't remember which of you, I talked to so many of you. I make these YouTube videos and podcasts, and I sound like so natural. Y'all tell me I sound natural, but it's not always easy. And sometimes I get vulnerable, and the ones where I'm the most vulnerable are the most comments on those videos. Because you can see right away, like the 2 comments or 40 comments. And the ones with 40 comments are the ones where I was vulnerable about my own sin or my own struggles or my own hurt or my own dumbness. Those are the ones where the women say, you helped me. By being vulnerable and looking dumb, I helped someone? Like, oh, that stinks. Why does it have to be like that? So I'm just learning that I just have to do it. Not that everyone has to start a YouTube channel, but with my children too, I help them most when I am vulnerable with them. Not that I tell them every mistake I've ever made, but I repent to them, I apologize when I mess up and things like that. So don't let your ego be this weird insecurity that holds you back. Likewise, don't be a martyr. Sometimes ego manifests in being a martyr. Women are really good at this. Sometimes we take on more than we ought to, more than is necessary, and then we don't ask for help, and we want everyone to notice our sacrifice. And that's the ego part. We want everyone to notice us. I think that's the core of ego. We want attention paid to us. And so we act the martyr. We set ourselves up for this horrendous feat of whatever it is. And we take on more than is necessary, more than we should. We don't ask for help. And now we're in a situation where we can say, woe is me. Pay attention to me and all the effort, and I didn't get any thanks. And I think that's like a weird, twisted form of ego. And I think we would be better off and more like Yeshua if we didn't do that. And sometimes that means saying no and not taking on too much. Because if you can't do it with joy, you're doing it wrong. We have to do everything we do as if we were doing it for Yeshua. And once we turn it into ego and we turn it into this martyrdom about us, we've lost the whole point, and our sacrifice of service is worthless to him. We may as well have not done it. So when we tell the Father no, your ego is saying that you know more than him. If the Father calls you to do something, if he calls you and your husband to start a congregation, or to foster, or to homeschool, or to visit your neighbors who you don't know at all, guilty. You're afraid of looking dumb. You tell him no when he puts that little still small voice in your head. You're telling him you know more than him. But sisters, the Father is smarter than us. And if he calls us to do something, he will equip us to do it. And if we look dumb, oh well. Yeshua looked dumb to the world all the time. All the time. And so did the disciples. And then we're so afraid of looking dumb. That is worldly, egotistical thinking. Number 3. Oh, we're good. Ego says that doing right, that when we do right, we ought to get blessings right now. But taking hold of Yeshua says that doing right actually brings persecution sometimes. And that is painful. The world has this idea that if you do the right thing, you're going to get an instant reward. It might be stock dividends. You buy the right stock, you make the right decision, you get more money. You put your kids in the right school, they instantly get straight A's and they get to all the best schools. You get like instant rewards when you do the right thing in the world. If you wear the right clothes, you get the right kind of recognition. If you buy the right car and the right boat, people think you have money and you get instant cool friends or whatever it is. It's all worldly and it's not wrong. There's a lot of stuff in the world that is perfectly fine. I call it common. And common is not wrong. Our hearts ruin it sometimes. But in the kingdom, when it comes to kingdom work, when we do the right Torah thing, sometimes we're actually persecuted. People don't like us. People distance themselves from us. People say nasty things about us. People won't speak to us anymore. And sometimes worse. Sometimes I get like weird death threats on my YouTube channel. I don't know what to do about that because I'm not stopping. Maybe I could move if I had to. But I just delete them. But I realized also I was trying to hide for a little while. This wasn't even part of it. I was like trying to be all incognito and hide, but it made doing anything really hard. Really hard. Since I decided, forget it, I'm Amy Gunther. No more compartments, no hiding stuff, no incognito. I would take care of my kids' safety, don't get me wrong. But ministry and work has become so much easier. Because I'm just going to say yes and do it, and I don't know. So be ready for doing what is right to bring persecution. It's not comfortable. We don't do what is right because it always feels good and turns out good. We do what is right because it is right. And even in your marriages, you love your husband well and you do right by him because the Torah tells us to do that. Not because he's going to treat you right back. Same with children relationships. I teach my children the same thing. You do right by your brother because you just are supposed to do what is right, regardless if he turns around and punches you or not. My kids don't hit each other. I'm kidding. But we can't do what is right based on feel-goods or rewards because they might not happen. So we have to let go of ego telling us that it's going to bring blessings now. And that's what Yeshua tells them in verse 37, is the cup that I drink, you will drink. And you're going to suffer. That's what he's saying here is you're going to suffer like me. You're going to suffer and be persecuted and be murdered like me. So do you know what you're asking? You want importance? You want status? You're going to suffer. You don't get importance and status without, and it just is all peaches and rainbows all the time. He says, you're going to suffer like me. You want to be like me? You're going to suffer like me. So number 4, ego says that everything must be fair, but taking hold of Yeshua says that justice belongs to Yahovah. Fair, justice, not the same thing. And it took me a while to understand that. I'm probably still understanding it. So in verse 41 in this passage, it says, the rest of the disciples became indignant. So, do we rejoice when other people get something good? So here's the idea, right? James and John, they're on the verge of getting the best seats in the house. They're on the verge of being exalted and honored in this very profound way. And the other disciples are like, what gives? Why do they get that? Why don't I get that? I'm jealous. I should get that too. Am I doing good? You guys look like you're like, I don't know. Am I okay? Are we good? Woo! Relaxing. So I see the disciples getting all like jealous and gross and it's icky and it's hard to watch, right? Like again, they're all in the inner circle. But they're jealous of each other. They're indignant. They're like, how dare you? How dare you think that you deserve that more than I deserve that? And they want things to be fair. And the kingdom of heaven is not fair. This is another thing I taught my children from a very young age, and we're still working on it. I'm still working on it. The older I get, and the older my children get, I realize we're all just a bunch of 5-year-olds trying to play nice in the sandbox. And it's not easy. And little children, little tiny children, they get really jealous when the other sibling gets something good. And I learned right away as a parent, I can never keep it fair. So I learned right away, just tell them, it's not fair. But then also I taught them to rejoice. When my oldest, Jack, was like 3, maybe 4, he came home from his little Awana thing, and they had given him, I think, a piece of candy for Bible verses, you know. But Bethany was like 2. She had only gotten a lousy animal cracker at her little nursery. And that wasn't fair. But you know what? I taught her, you have to be happy for Jack. You have to be so happy that your brother, the person you love more than anyone else, got something good. Aren't you happy for him? You love him. You want him to have good things. And other times, you're going to get good things, and he's going to be happy for you. Because it's so much better to have something good when people are happy for you and not indignant. I mean, not like Yeshua was going to grant those guys their request, but if he had, those disciples better have been happy for them. And then wouldn't you know it, Jack actually came home with 2 candies because he made sure to get one for his sister. And they have been like that ever since. So, but sometimes it's still not fair, and we have to teach our children this, and then we have to remember it ourselves. People around you will get all kinds of blessings that you do not get. Children, cars, great husbands, community, all kinds of things. Good bodies. Whatever it is. Don't be jealous of them. Rejoice with them that they got it. And if people do somehow, deserve something worse, justice belongs to the Father. And we have to let those things go. Psalm 37, Anne, has gotten me through a lot of hard times. Psalm 37:27, turn away from evil and do good. Let me read that one again. That could sum up the whole conference. Turn away from evil and do good. So shall you dwell forever, for Yehovah loves justice, and he will not forsake his saints. Number 5, ego says that being in charge makes you important. But taking hold of Yeshua means using your position to care for others. So again, servant leadership. So in verses 42 and 43 of our Mark 10 passage, Yeshua reminds them that in this world, being great is counted by the number of people you control, or the number of people who look up to you. So let me read that again. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at verse 42. And Yeshua called them to him and said to them, you know that those guys over there who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great must be last. So he uses an example of some other rulers being real jerks. And don't we see that in the world today? The worldly leaders even some religious leaders are real jerks to their people, and they abuse people, treat them poorly, and they're really just seeking power and fame, and their ego is running the show, not the Bible. I think it's so easy when we look at the world and we all just want to be leaders. I don't see like leaders in scriptures. I see overseers, I see elders, I see servant leaders, and it's not the way the world does it. I worked even at a hospital. Even at a hospital, you have it's like in the military, you have pegs, ranks, and there has to be order. I'm not saying order is wrong. There has to be order. There has to be decision makers and responsibility bearers. Those go together. But even in the hospital, I worked in a department where I had some influence, we'll say that. You had to serve people. If you want to get people to do what you want to do, you have to serve them. You have to encourage them. You have to tell them they're doing a bad job before you show them that they're doing a wrong job, And then you have to equip them and give them tools and resources and things like that. And in a way, that's being a servant leader. How much more in the kingdom of heaven ought we to be like that as moms? Am I serving my kids well if I just lord it over them? Or am I serving them better if I'm servant leadering them? Servant leadering, there you go, another made-up word. We like to chase numbers. The world likes to chase numbers. A good church is a huge church with 1,000 people. But we're seeing in the kingdom, in this renewal, this reawakening, that numbers do not and should not matter. Disciples matter. Help your husbands, if they're running a congregation or a ministry, to not chase numbers. It will be a futile effort that will frustrate them. It will turn them into egomaniacs comparing, because it's something measurable, right? We like something we can count. How great is my ministry? Well, I have 10,000 YouTube subscribers. Must be a great ministry. Really? What if they're just robots? I mean, you don't know. How many disciples are you making? How many people are teshuvahing? How many people are having lives changed and touched? And so if your congregation is 2 families, if your congregation is your family, are you growing people? Are you growing disciples? I'd say you're bearing good fruit in the kingdom. So being important is not a numbers game. There's so many other places in Scripture where Yeshua tells us that there's no place for ego in the kingdom. Matthew 19:30. So in here he says, whoever would be first must be a slave. In Matthew 19, you don't have to go there, but he says, many who are first will be last, and the last first. In Matthew 20, again, it says, so the last will be first, and the first last. In Matthew 5, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we also see this pattern in the Levitical priesthood, I think. So the Levites were in charge of the people, really, right? And sometimes we call them leaders. They were the leaders of the people, but were they? They were servants. They didn't really have a lot of privileges. See, in the world, we're taught that if you're the leader, you get all the privileges. But when we look at the Levitical priesthood, did they have all the privileges? They had responsibility, and they had to serve. We talk about this sometimes, it's okay to set up chairs and to clean the kitchen after the potluck on Shabbat because you're cleaning for service. Well, that's work. It's service. You're being a servant on Shabbat, and I do think that's okay. That's not what I'm saying. But the attendees get to more relax. So the Levites were doing the same thing. They were serving in the temple on Shabbat. Other people were relaxing. They were servant leaders. And again, I don't even like to use the word leader with it. They were just servants. They didn't get to own land, and they didn't get to have their own livestock and stuff, right? People brought them things. They were totally reliant on the Father. So if we look at them and say, oh, they had a position of honor, they were in charge, well, they didn't really get rich, right? The other tribes could get more wealthy and have an increase and things like that. The Levites got the portion. And of course, it was always enough, and they were totally fine. And I pray they were content. And maybe that's part of the twisted priesthood that came later, and the Father found fault with that because things got messed up, and I think they started to try to seek ego more than servanthood. So we ought not, of course, to seek positions of power. Some people must be in positions of authority, though, hopefully with the right mindset. But don't seek a position of authority for ego. So please don't misunderstand me. I think it's okay to be in a position of authority. Like when I had that nursing position, I could help thousands of patients. Some of the work I did, I know I helped the safety and outcomes for thousands of patients. If I had been at the bedside, I can help one patient at a time in a super meaningful way, but I really liked helping lots, you know? So being in a position of authority is not wrong as long as your mindset is correct. There were lots of examples in the scriptures of people in positions of authority because the Father put them there. Moses grew up in the palace. Daniel ended up in a palace going to university. Joseph ended up in a position of authority. Esther ended up married to a king for the Father's purpose. And they did not just seek these things, they said yes and weren't afraid to look dumb. But they also had to suffer to get there. But thank goodness they did, because God uses it, of course, to save his people. So when you see people, our Hebrew brethren, in positions of power, you don't know if the Father put them there. Don't judge people who end up in charge of things in the worldly arena, because the Father may have put them there to help us do a greater exodus someday. That's just my hunch, because that's what we saw happen before. So if someone says you should never go to college, are you sure about that? You should never try to, if we complain about the worldly systems, maybe we should actually try to influence them. The Father put some people in worldly systems. Just don't be of the world. Keep that mindset in check. Keep that desire for ego in check, because he might bring it crashing down to accomplish his purpose. Moses didn't stay esteemed by the Egyptians for very long. And Joseph stayed esteemed for a while, but Daniel was ultimately still a slave. The only reason he had a position was just to serve the king. So just keep our mindset in check. And honestly, we already have power. See, I think the world always wants power. They're always power hungry and grabbing for it and chasing power and trying to have more power than the other person. But the scriptures are really clear that we already have power. Why are we chasing after more? We have the most amazing supernatural power that the world could never have. Why do we need the world's power? We've already got it. So here's just a few places. And I am not talking about magic, say a few words and you make things happen. I don't believe in that. But here's what the scriptures say. 1 Peter 1:3 is just one example. You don't have to turn there. His divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness. Ephesians 6:10, be strong in Yahovah and in the strength of his might. James 4:7, resist the devil and he will flee. That's powerful. Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue. 2 Timothy 1:7, God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. Can't forget that part. Self-control, keeping our mindset in check. 1 John 4:4, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. We have power. John 1:12, but to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right and the power to become the children of God. That's the most powerful thing of all, that he calls us his own. We're in the inner circle. Romans 15:13, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. That's really what the world is chasing. They want hope. They want hope. Deuteronomy 30:11, you guys know this. I'll just go to the end. 30:11 through 14. The word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so that you can do it. There's a lot in Torah, but we can do it because we have all this power. And it's supernatural. It's not magic. It's supernatural from the Father through the Holy Spirit living in us. And so when we chase the world's power because we're dissatisfied with the power I don't even talk in here about the spiritual gifts. I believe in spiritual gifts. I have seen them. Don't squish your spiritual gifts. And don't just read some book off a Christian bookstore and I have these 3 spiritual gifts and that's it and that's all. I'm not serving in any other way, because you know what? I see in Scripture the Father equips us with gifts that come and go when he tells you to do something. So just answer him, yes, Father, I'm afraid of looking down, but I'm going to try anyway because I just want to be where you want me to be. Sometimes we just try to make our own plans and he says, I'm already working. I'm inviting you to join in what I already have going on. You're not going to get any glory for it because someone watered, someone planted, someone watered, you're just another waterer. You're not going to reap that harvest. You don't get a notch in your belt. No one's ever going to know that you did anything. Just join me. Just say yes and do what I want you to do. And he gives us power to do these things because the Scriptures tell us he does. And when we negate it and we're like chasing leadership roles just for the sake of being in charge, you're just going to be so dissatisfied. So if you're feeling weak, I just encourage you to do a study on how powerful we already are. And that should be so satisfying because these are things the world does not have, nor can they have until they come in covenant. Number 6, ego says that you know everything, but taking hold of Yeshua says to be humble and know that you need Yah. This whole interaction between the disciples and Yeshua reminds me of Solomon. And you can read this later because I'm running out of time. But 1 Kings chapter 3, when, I'll read part of it. Yehovah appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, ask what I should give you. So it's the opposite way this time. The Father says to Solomon, what do you want? Open book, open favor, ask for any favor you want. Solomon did not ask to sit at the right hand. He asked for wisdom. He knew he needed Yah. And that's the kind of wisdom that can only come from Yah. So he knew that he didn't know everything, and that's a powerful thing to know. Knowing that we are lacking in understanding and all the facts is powerful. Being willing to take advice is powerful. I cannot tell you how many times since starting Torah, and even with the Torah sister stuff that I do, I look back and wish I had listened to people because they were usually right. And so I'm learning now when someone throws an idea at me, if it comes from someone who has been right in the past and who has always counseled me well, I'm way more likely now to do their idea. Even to George, I told him I was going to tell this story. When Christy and I and George first got together and had a little huddle after we arrived, George said, hey, I got these fancy little throat drops. You just drop them in the back of your throat. You guys are going to be talking a lot and your voice is going to get hoarse. You should do this. And I was like, I'm good. I'm a nurse. I know things. And you guys know I don't know anything about homeopathic or natural medicine at all because I'm classically trained. And I really didn't even think I needed them. I was like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm fine. I'm healthy and good. I don't even have a sniffle. I don't need throat drops that probably taste like rotten cheese. Sorry, the thoughts in my head. But I did take a picture of it for later. So what do you know what? Last night I got the worst sore throat I've had in probably 10 years. I had a lump in my neck. My ear hurt. It was going all the way up into my ear. And I went to my nurse friend, and she's like, yeah, you're probably talking too much. And so then I went to George, and I was like, can I have the stupid drops? And I took some to go, and I went to bed, which is like the hardest thing to do, and I do feel better. But I thought that I knew everything. And how often do we do that? Like, of course George would know. He does this stuff. He knows. He knew I would talk nonstop. Plus, I fellowship with George. He just knows I like to talk. So listen to people. Be willing to take advice because we don't know everything. And most of all, be humble before our God. Because he does say, come to me with what you want. And let us be like Solomon and say, woo, make me wise. Because I want to do right by your people. Number 7, we're getting there. We only have like 2 more. Ego says that you need a reward right now. But taking hold of Yeshua says, run the long race. And then we kind of talked about this before, but I'm going to just belabor it a little bit longer because we are a short-sighted, short attention span, needy, crybaby kind of a people. And I think it's because we're spoiled Americans. I don't see any, because we're godly women, I know we're chasing after righteousness, but I myself am sometimes very short-sighted. And we look at our brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering persecution, and I think they see the long race much better than I do. I feel like if I don't get instant reward, if I ask the Father, like Christy last night gave a great example, the Father gave her instant peace. I feel like if I don't get it, and we don't always get instant whatever we want from the Father, sometimes He does. And I'm sure He gave that to her because she was giving to you. But sometimes at home, we don't get instant anything from the Father. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Are we in it for the long race? Ego says, I deserve. And when we start saying, I deserve something, Father, you will live the most unsatisfied, unshalomi, miserable existence. When you have this attitude of, I deserve whatever. I deserve a good husband. I deserve obedient children. I keep Torah. The Bible says people who keep Torah have blessings and they're rich. I deserve that. Are you sure that's what it says? I think a lot of those promises are sort of like national promises, and we forget we're in exile still. He's waking us up, but we're not all the way there. There's a lot more people coming. This is just the beginning. And the reason we're here is because we're supposed to keep making disciples. We think that just because we know about Torah, all things are restored. They are not. The garden was not like it is now. I wish it was. But I'm not going to live in a fairy tale world pretending like I live in a land with no sin or an existence with no sin, no death, no crying, no tears. But it's coming. The 8th day is coming. But I'm not going to pretend like I'm there. There is suffering. There is things to do. There's work to do. There's people to love. There's flesh to control. And I'm in it for the long haul. And when the attacks come and the rewards don't come, oh well. I will cry. I will have my moment. I have my sisters. But I'm going to keep going. We have no choice. We have no choice. Things are not how we want them. A lot of you have grown children who are not walking rightly. You keep walking rightly. And I say to you ladies often, I respect you because I think there's a great insecurity that comes from a lot of things that are not quite right in our lives. I respect you, but should it matter? The Father sees you running the race, and that is all that matters. You care about what the Father sees and stop caring about what Amy Gunther thinks, okay? It does not matter what I think or the person next to you. It matters what your husband thinks a great deal. But walk rightly, and your husband's going to think highly of you. We just always are doing the next right thing until we die. One right thing after another. And there's no room for ego in any of it. Once your ego starts to get in the way, you're going to start going right and left. It's going to steer you wrong. And you're just going to be so dissatisfied. Ego satisfies right now, but humility rewards us later. Hebrews 12:1, don't turn there, just jot it down if you're a note taker. Hebrews 12:1 says, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. 1 Corinthians 9 says, I'm shortening, run so you may obtain it. Because there is a reward coming. There is like a sort of like kingdom status coming. And the Father says that, like, some of you will get a status. There's things prepared in the final kingdom. There are rewards. But we're not supposed to just demand those now. They are for later. Deuteronomy 30:19, choose life that you and your offspring may live. We have to look long term. And on the back of your programs, I put Psalm 139:23 and 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. There's a reason I put that on the back of your programs. I think that verse really sums up our entire retreat. Take off, know my heart, and help me to let go of honestly the sin. All of this is just sin. Let's just call it what it is, sin. And put on righteousness, put on Yeshua, because he is righteousness. It's the same thing. And lead me in the way everlasting. The long haul. That's what you're taking hold of. And so finally, number 8. As we talk about letting go of ego, ego says, and here's the ultimate I deserve. Ego says that you deserve eternal life. You deserve to be in the kingdom. You deserve to have salvation, or whatever you want to call it. Taking hold of Yeshua and really embracing Yeshua and all of what he told us means that you understand it is a gift of grace through faith. And we ought not, and Christy said some of this too, and it's just a good reminder for all of us that we ought never to think that we're saving ourselves by our obedience, because we have already messed it up. Those little 3-year-olds who were jealous of each other's candy, that was all of us. And because of that sin, we're already on a bad path. But there was a rescue plan in place. His name was Yeshua. And because of his sacrifice, that sin is covered. That sin is atoned for. So verse 45 in our passage, Yeshua gets back to that basic gospel principle. And he says, even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. I feel like he's reminding them, you guys are chasing the wrong things. You've already got the best thing, and that's the hope of resurrection. And because you have that, you ought to understand this life is just a breath. You're here to serve me. You're here to love each other. You're here to bring glory to me. It's the whole duty of man to bring glory to the Father, not to chase our own, not to chase our egos, and certainly never to tell our children or tell each other that if you keep Torah good enough, you're going to heaven. Now, there's a lot to that. I know that the gospel involves obedience. I know, trust me, like I got the little strings, you know? We walk out our faith by demonstrating it. People who have really had a heart change are going to demonstrate our faith with our obedience. But Yeshua reminded people over and over and over, don't get haughty in that. Don't lose sight of that. And so I don't think it would be good if we ended the retreat without me also reminding us to just remember where our faith comes from, and to remember what his sacrifice was, and that he let go of ego more than any of us ever could. He suffered and was crucified in the most humiliating way for us so that we could have that resurrection one day and be done with all the filth and the suffering in this life. And yet in this life, he also gives us many blessings, which we enjoy because he's a good, good Father. But may we never just puff up and chase after righteousness without also taking hold of his hem as the source of our salvation. Does that make sense? It's like such a basic 5-year-old thing, I know, but I'm just so grateful for his grace, because I try to steal other people's candy metaphorically all the time, you know? I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner. We all have to just sometimes say that out loud and say it to the Father, I'm a sinner. Please save me. And I was going to talk about what it means to be a ransom for many, but I think you guys all understand that concept of buying back and redeeming something. We needed to be bought back, and so he paid a high price. Therefore, I will glorify him in all that I do. Lastly, I'll just say that teshuvah, this idea of returning, is for all people. And that's why I also wanted to end on this note. And Christy really likes to remind us of this too, that we're not here just for ourselves. We're here to be a light to the nations. And the nations are his people too. The nations are, a lot of them are, well, I guess you could call them goy, but I think they're his people who are yet to be grafted back in. And we have good news. We have good news to go tell them, and we should tell them with joy, in humility, because we let go of ego. Yeshua was the absolute opposite of ego, and we have no better example than him. So I encourage you guys just to let go of your ego, take hold of Yeshua, let him transform you, and really, really analyze every day when we get up, how can I be him today to someone else, and to just die to self. Just die to self. I love all you ladies so much. I still cannot believe you guys drove here, whether you're close or far, spent money on tickets, all of these things. You have blessed me tremendously. Tremendously. I started Torah Sisters just because I wanted to say Happy Sabbath. That's all I wanted to say. My husband was not a Torah keeper, and he did not want me to talk about Sabbath on my Facebook page, and I submitted to him, no problem, because he would feel embarrassed. And I said, how about if I start a Facebook page, but I don't call it like Amy Gunther, I'll call it Torah Sisters. And then can I say Happy Sabbath there, because nobody will know it's me. I'm like incognito. He said, yeah, whatever. I said, okay. So I started a Facebook page called Torah Sisters, and I started making memes, and I said, Happy Sabbath every Friday night. And now we all get to do this together. So I started that because I wanted you. And boy, did the Father answer. Holy cow. So thank you for coming. I love you, ladies.